Hello and welcome to Dark Cosmos Theory. I'm so glad you're here. Whether you're settling into bed, curling up on the couch, or just trying to wind down after a long day of pondering the mysteries of existence, you've come to the right place. This is a quiet corner of the internet where quantum mechanics gets soft-spoken and consciousness puts on pajamas. Tonight, we're diving into one of the most extraordinary frontiers in science. The idea that your brain might be connected to the very fabric of the universe through quantum mechanics. Imagine for a moment that right now, as you listen to these words, tiny structures inside your neurons are performing quantum computations that classical physics says should be impossible at body temperature. Yet, recent experiments suggest they're happening anyway. And if this is true, it could mean your consciousness isn't just trapped inside your skull, but potentially entangled with the quantum field that underlies all of reality. It's a journey that takes us from the deepest mysteries of the mind to the strangest corners of physics and a few surprises that might just change how you think about what it means to be you. Now, I do hope this video isn't so fascinating that it keeps you awake, but hey, if it does, at least you'll be contemplating the nature of consciousness itself a fair trade. I'd say, before we begin, if you enjoy these gentle explorations into the deepest questions of science and existence, I'd be ever so grateful if you tapped the like button, subscribed, or even just left a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the universe. Alright, take a deep breath, settle in, and let's begin our quiet voyage into the quantum nature of mind. What if I told you that the answer to consciousness, the hardest problem in science, might be hiding in the smallest possible spaces inside your brain right now? As you process these words, tiny hollow tubes called microtubules are vibrating at frequencies that classical physics says should collapse instantly in the warm, wet environment of your neurons. Yet somehow they persist. And according to a growing body of research, they might be the key to understanding not just consciousness, but how your mind connects to the quantum fabric of reality itself. This isn't science fiction. It's the quantum consciousness revolution, and it's happening in laboratories around the world, from Wellesley College, where researchers have discovered that anesthesia works by disrupting quantum processes in microtubules, to Trinity College Dublin, where scientists may have detected quantum entanglement in living human brains. The evidence is mounting that consciousness operates on principles far stranger than we ever imagined. Let's start our journey where it all began, with a simple yet profound question that has puzzled philosophers and scientists for centuries. How does the 3 lb lump of tissue in your skull generate the rich, inner world of your conscious experience? When you see the color red, feel the warmth of sunlight on your skin, or experience the bittersweet pang of nostalgia, what exactly is happening that creates these subjective experiences, and why do you have them at all? This is what philosopher David Chalmers famously called the hard problem of consciousness. It's not just about how the brain processes information. That's the easy problem. Relatively speaking, the hard problem is explaining why there's something it's like to be you. Why you have an inner life at all, rather than being a sophisticated biological robot processing inputs and generating outputs with nobody home upstairs. For decades, neuroscientists have assumed that consciousness emerges from classical computational processes in the brain. Billions of neurons firing in complex patterns, creating networks of activity that somehow give rise to subjective experience. But there's a problem with this view. It doesn't actually explain why these processes should feel like anything from the inside. You could theoretically have all the same neural activity, all the same behavioral outputs, without any conscious experience whatsoever. This explanatory gap between brain activity and subjective experience has led some researchers to look beyond classical physics for answers. And what they found in the quantum realm is both strange and beautiful quantum mechanics. The theory that describes the behavior of matter and energy at the smallest scales operates on principles that seem to defy common sense. Particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously, a phenomenon called superposition. They can be instantly connected across vast distances through entanglement, and they can tunnel through barriers that should be impenetrable. For most of the 20th century, scientists assumed that these quantum effects were too delicate to survive in biological systems. The brain is warm, wet, and noisy, the antithesis of the carefully controlled conditions needed for quantum phenomena, or so we thought. But nature, it turns out, is far more clever than we gave it credit for. The story of quantum consciousness begins with an unlikely partnership between Sir Roger Penrose, a mathematical physicist and Nobel laureate, and Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist. Their backgrounds couldn't have been more different. Yet, they shared a conviction that classical physics alone couldn't explain consciousness. In the 1990 seconds, they proposed a radical theory called orchestrated objective reduction, or Orch for short. According to their theory, consciousness doesn't emerge from the classical firing of neurons, but from quantum computations happening inside structures called microtubules. These are tiny hollow tubes that form the cytoskeleton of neurons, giving them their shape and helping transport materials throughout the cell. But Penrose and Hameroff suggested they serve another more exotic function as quantum computers. The idea was initially met with skepticism, and for good reason. Quantum effects typically require temperatures near absolute zero to prevent decoherence, the process by which quantum superpositions collapse into classical states. The brain operates at a balmy 37 degrees Celsius, hardly the kind of environment where delicate quantum states should survive. Critics argued that the brain was simply too warm, wet, and noisy for quantum consciousness to be possible. But then something interesting happened as researchers began studying quantum effects in biological systems. They discovered that nature had found ways to protect and even exploit quantum coherence at room temperature photosynthesis. The process by which plants convert sunlight into energy was found to use quantum superposition to explore all possible energy transfer paths, simultaneously achieving near-perfect efficiency. Bird navigation systems appear to rely on quantum entanglement in certain proteins to sense magnetic fields. Even our sense of smell might involve quantum tunneling effects. Suddenly, the idea that the brain might harbor quantum processes didn't seem quite so far-fetched. And then came the experimental evidence that would change everything. In recent years, multiple studies have provided support for quantum effects in microtubules. Researchers at the University of Alberta shined light into microtubules and observed quantum coherence lasting far longer than classical physics would predict, up to nanoseconds in some cases, which is an eternity in quantum terms. Another study at the University of Central Florida found that microtubules could maintain quantum states for up to a second, providing ample time for quantum computations to influence neural activity. These findings suggested that microtubules weren't just passive structural elements, but active quantum processors capable of the kind of coherent quantum activity that Penrose and Hameroff had proposed. But perhaps the most compelling evidence came from an unexpected source: anesthesia research at Wellesley College. In 2024, researchers made a startling discovery. They found that anesthetic drugs, which reliably induce unconsciousness, don't just affect neural firing patterns. They specifically bind to microtubules and disrupt their quantum activity. When they gave rats drugs that stabilize microtubules, the animals took significantly longer to lose consciousness under anesthesia, suggesting that disrupting quantum processes in microtubules is what actually causes the loss of consciousness. This finding was revolutionary because it provided a direct link between quantum processes and conscious experience. If consciousness were purely classical, disrupting microtubules shouldn't affect it. But the fact that stabilizing these structures delays unconsciousness suggests that quantum activity in microtubules is indeed necessary for conscious awareness. The implications are staggering. If consciousness really does operate through quantum processes, it could explain some of the most puzzling aspects of the mind. Why consciousness seems unified despite being generated by billions of separate neurons. why we can process information in ways that surpass even the most sophisticated computers, and perhaps most intriguingly, why consciousness might not be confined to individual brains at all. Quantum entanglement, the phenomenon Einstein called spooky action at a distance, allows particles to remain connected regardless of the distance between them. When two particles are entangled, measuring one instantly affects the state of the other. No matter how far apart they are, this connection transcends space and time, operating outside the normal constraints of relativity. If consciousness really does involve quantum processes, then it's possible that individual minds could be entangled with each other and with the quantum field that underlies all of reality. Recent experiments at Trinity College Dublin have provided tantalizing hints that such entanglement might actually exist in living brains. Using sophisticated MRI techniques, researchers detected signatures that could indicate quantum entanglement between different brain regions. While the interpretation of these results is still debated, they represent the first potential evidence of quantum entanglement in living biological systems. If these findings hold up, they could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness and our place in the universe. Consciousness wouldn't be a private, isolated phenomenon trapped inside individual skulls, but part of a vast interconnected web of quantum information that spans the cosmos. Your thoughts, feelings, and experiences might be entangled with the quantum structure of reality itself, connecting you to the universe in ways we're only beginning to understand. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The quantum consciousness theory, while supported by growing evidence, still faces significant challenges and criticisms. Many neuroscientists remain skeptical, arguing that classical neural networks can explain most aspects of consciousness without invoking quantum mechanics. The success of artificial intelligence systems like ChatGPT in mimicking human cognition suggests that classical computation might be sufficient to generate intelligent behavior. Moreover, the quantum effects that have been observed in biological systems, while impressive, are still far from proving that they're responsible for consciousness. It's one thing to show that microtubules can maintain quantum coherence. It's another to demonstrate that this coherence is necessary and sufficient for conscious experience. The gap between quantum processes and subjective experience remains as mysterious as ever. There's also the question of what exactly quantum consciousness would mean for our understanding of free will identity and the nature of reality. If our minds are quantum systems operating according to the probabilistic laws of quantum mechanics, are our choices truly free, or are they simply the result of quantum randomness? If consciousness can be entangled across space and time, what does that mean for individual identity and personal responsibility? These are not just academic questions. They touch on the deepest aspects of human existence and meaning. As we continue to probe the quantum foundations of consciousness, we may find ourselves confronting profound philosophical implications that challenge our most basic assumptions about reality. Yet, there's something deeply beautiful about the possibility that consciousness might be woven into the very fabric of the universe, that the subjective experience of being you isn't an accident of neural computation, but a fundamental feature of reality itself. It suggests that mind and matter aren't separate domains, but different aspects of a deeper underlying unity, a quantum field of pure information and possibility from which both physical, reality and conscious experience emerge. This idea isn't entirely new. It echoes ancient philosophical traditions that have long suggested the interconnectedness of all things. But now we have the tools of modern science to explore these possibilities with unprecedented precision. Quantum field theory, information theory, and neuroscience are converging to paint a picture of reality that is far stranger and more wonderful than our everyday experience suggests. Before we continue deeper into this exploration, let's take a moment to understand more about what quantum mechanics actually is and why it's so profoundly strange. You see, at the scale of atoms and subatomic particles, the universe operates according to rules that seem to violate everything we know from our everyday experience. In the quantum world, Particles don't have definite positions or velocities until they're measured. Instead, they exist as probability waves, spread out across space in all possible locations, simultaneously. This isn't just a limitation of our knowledge, it's a fundamental feature of reality at the quantum scale. Before measurement, an electron literally is in multiple places at once. This phenomenon, called quantum superposition, was famously illustrated by Erwin Schrödinger with his thought experiment about a cat in a box. According to quantum mechanics, until you open the box and observe the cat, it exists in a superposition of being both alive and dead. While Schrödinger meant this as a criticism of quantum theory, pointing out how absurd it seemed, subsequent experiments have confirmed that quantum superposition is real. Particles really do exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed, but superposition is just the beginning of quantum weirdness. There's also quantum entanglement, which Einstein found so disturbing that he spent years trying to prove it couldn't be real. When two particles become entangled, they form a single quantum system. Measuring the current, the state of one particle instantaneously determines the state of the other, no matter how far apart they are. This happens faster than light could travel between them, seemingly violating Einstein's principle that nothing can travel faster than light. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance and believed it showed that quantum mechanics was incomplete. But in 1964, physicist John Stuart Bell devised a way to test whether entanglement was real, and every experiment since has confirmed that particles really are instantaneously connected across space. Entanglement is real, and it suggests that at the quantum level, the universe is far more interconnected than we ever imagined. Then there's quantum tunneling, the phenomenon where particles can pass through barriers that classical physics says should be impenetrable. Imagine throwing a ball at a wall and having it appear on the other side without breaking through. That's impossible in our everyday world, but at the quantum scale, it happens all the time. Electrons can tunnel through barriers, and this effect is essential to how the sun produces energy through nuclear fusion. Without quantum tunneling, the sun wouldn't shine, and we wouldn't be here. These quantum phenomena might sound like abstract physics with no relevance to everyday life, but they're actually fundamental to how the universe works. And increasingly, we're discovering that they might be fundamental to how life and consciousness work too. The question that Penrose and Hameroff asked was this: if quantum effects are so important in chemistry and biology, why wouldn't they be important in the most complex biological system we know, the human brain? And if consciousness is the result of quantum processes, then perhaps it inherits some of the strange properties of the quantum world. Perhaps consciousness, like quantum particles, isn't confined to a single location. Perhaps different aspects of consciousness can be entangled, binding together disparate parts of your experience into a unified whole. Perhaps consciousness, like quantum particles, exists in a superposition of possibilities until the moment of awareness collapses them into definite experiences. To understand how this might work in the brain, we need to look more closely at microtubules. These structures are found in nearly every cell in your body, but they're especially abundant in neurons. Each microtubule is a hollow cylinder made of proteins called tubulins. These tubulins can exist in different configurations, and according to the Orch OR theory, they can exist in quantum superpositions of these configurations. Imagine each tubulin as a tiny switch that can be both on and off at the same time. In a single microtubule, there might be thousands of these switches, all in superposition, creating an enormous number of possible states. It's as if each microtubule is simultaneously computing all possible solutions to a problem, like a quantum computer exploring many pathways at once. But here's where it gets really interesting. Penrose and Hameroff proposed that these quantum computations in microtubules don't just process information, they're directly responsible for conscious moments. According to their theory, consciousness emerges when the quantum superposition in microtubules becomes so complex that it reaches a threshold. At this threshold, the superposition becomes unstable and collapses, selecting one specific configuration from all the possibilities. This collapse, they suggest, is what we experience as a moment of consciousness, and it happens about 40 times per second, creating the illusion of continuous awareness, like frames in a movie. The mathematics behind this idea comes from Penrose's work on quantum gravity. He proposed that quantum superpositions don't collapse randomly, but according to a process he called objective reduction. This collapse happens when the superposition reaches a certain threshold related to the curvature of space-time itself. In other words, consciousness might be linked not just to quantum mechanics, but to the fundamental structure of space-time. This is a profound claim. It suggests that consciousness isn't just a byproduct of biological evolution, but is connected to the deepest laws of physics. Your moment-to-moment awareness might be synchronized with vibrations in the fabric of space-time itself. But does this really happen in the brain? For years, critics argued that it couldn't. They pointed out that quantum coherence requires isolation from the environment. Any interaction with the surrounding molecules should cause rapid decoherence, collapsing the quantum state before it could do anything useful. And the brain, with its warm temperature and constant molecular motion, seemed like the worst possible place for quantum coherence to survive. This objection seemed fatal to the quantum consciousness theory, until researchers started looking more carefully at biological systems and discovering that nature had evolved mechanisms to protect quantum coherence. The breakthrough came from studies of photosynthesis. When a photon of sunlight hits a chlorophyll molecule in a plant, it creates an excitation that needs to find its way to the reaction center, where it can be converted into chemical energy. Classical physics suggested this should be a random walk, with the excitation bouncing around until it happens to find the right destination. But that would be incredibly inefficient. Instead, researchers discovered that the excitation exists in a quantum superposition. Exploring all possible paths simultaneously and selecting the most efficient route, this quantum coherence persists for hundreds of femtoseconds, even at room temperature. The plant's molecular structure creates what physicists call a protected quantum channel, shielding the quantum state from environmental noise. Evolution, it seems, has learned to exploit quantum mechanics for biological advantage. If plants can do this, why not neurons? Further research revealed other examples of quantum effects in biology. The European robin's ability to navigate using Earth's magnetic field appears to rely on quantum entanglement in a protein called cryptochrome. When light hits this protein in the bird's eye, it creates a pair of entangled electrons. Earth's magnetic field affects these entangled electrons differently, depending on the bird's orientation, allowing it to sense which direction it's facing. This quantum compass works at body temperature, protected by the protein's structure. Even more remarkably, the coherence time is long enough for the bird to actually use the information. Evolution has found a way to create and maintain quantum entanglement in a warm, noisy biological environment. Our sense of smell might also involve quantum effects. According to the vibration theory of olfaction, proposed by Luca Turin, we distinguish different molecules not just by their shape, but by their vibrational frequencies. And the mechanism for detecting these vibrations might be quantum tunneling. When an odorant molecule binds to a receptor in your nose, an electron needs to move from one side of the receptor to the other, but there's an energy barrier in the way. According to classical physics, the electron shouldn't be able to cross this barrier unless the odorant molecule has the right vibrational frequency to provide the necessary energy. But quantum mechanics allows the electron to tunnel through the barrier, and the probability of tunneling depends on the molecule's vibration. This quantum mechanism could explain how we can distinguish between molecules that have the same shape but different isotopes. Classical shape-based theories can't explain this, but quantum tunneling can. Again, we see quantum effects operating at body temperature in biological systems. These discoveries revolutionized our understanding of what's possible in biology. If quantum coherence can survive in chlorophyll, cryptochrome, and olfactory receptors, then maybe it can survive in microtubules too. And if evolution has harnessed quantum effects for photosynthesis, navigation, and smell, why wouldn't it harness them for the most important biological function of all, consciousness? Recent experiments have begun to confirm that microtubules really can support quantum coherence. In 2014, a team at the University of Alberta used ultraviolet light to probe microtubules and found evidence of quantum resonance at specific frequencies. The microtubules weren't just randomly vibrating, they were maintaining coherent quantum oscillations, just as the Orch theory predicted. Other studies have found that microtubules can act as waveguides, channeling energy and information along their length through quantum mechanisms. The hollow core of the microtubule might create a protected space where quantum coherence can persist, shielded from the surrounding cellular environment. Perhaps, most intriguingly, researchers have found that microtubules are far more dynamic than anyone realized. They're constantly growing, shrinking, and reconfiguring themselves in response to neural activity. This dynamic instability might be essential for consciousness, allowing the brain to rapidly shift between different quantum states as it processes information and generates experience. The picture that's emerging is of microtubules as quantum information processors, performing computations that classical neural networks simply cannot match. A classical computer processes information sequentially, one step at a time. A quantum computer can explore many possibilities simultaneously through superposition, then collapse to the optimal solution. If your brain harnesses quantum computation through microtubules, it would explain some of consciousness's most mysterious properties. Why can you grasp complex ideas in a flash of insight rather than step by step? Why can you recognize a face instantly, even though it would take a classical computer millions of calculations? Why does consciousness feel qualitatively different from unconscious information processing? Perhaps because quantum consciousness operates on fundamentally different principles than classical computation. But there's more to the story than just individual neurons. The Orch theory proposes that quantum coherence extends beyond single microtubules, connecting many neurons together through quantum entanglement. This happens through structures called gap junctions, which directly connect the interiors of neighboring neurons. Unlike synapses, which use chemical signals to communicate, gap junctions allow ions and small molecules to flow directly from one neuron to another. And, according to Hameroff and Penrose, they might also allow quantum information to flow between neurons, creating coherent quantum states that span large regions of the brain. This quantum binding across many neurons could explain the unity of consciousness. When you see a red rose, different parts of your brain process the color, shape, scent, and emotional associations. Classical neuroscience struggles to explain how these separate processes are bound together into a single, unified experience. But if quantum entanglement connects different brain regions, they could share quantum states instantaneously, creating an integrated field of awareness. The binding problem, which has puzzled neuroscientists for decades, might be solved by quantum mechanics. Your unified conscious experience might be a quantum phenomenon, with different aspects of perception entangled into a single quantum state that collapses into the experience of seeing a red rose. This quantum binding might also explain the temporal structure of consciousness. Experiments have shown that consciousness doesn't process information continuously, but in discrete moments. You perceive the world in snapshots, roughly 40 times per second, though you experience it as continuous. Why this particular frequency? According to the Orch theory, it's the frequency at which quantum superpositions in microtubules reach the threshold for objective reduction. Each collapse creates a conscious moment, a frame in the movie of your experience. The frequency depends on the level of quantum superposition, which in turn depends on factors like neural activity, attention, and arousal. During deep sleep, with minimal neural activity, quantum superpositions collapse less frequently, and consciousness fades. During wakefulness, especially during intense focus, superpositions build up rapidly, creating the rich flow of conscious experience. Interestingly, this 40 Hz frequency shows up throughout neuroscience. It's the frequency of gamma oscillations, brainwaves that correlate with conscious awareness. When different brain regions synchronize at 40 Hz, people report unified conscious experiences. When this synchronization breaks down, as in certain disorders, consciousness fragments, could this 40 Hz rhythm be the signature of quantum consciousness? Could the electrical oscillations we measure with EEG be the downstream effects of quantum collapses in microtubules? The Orch theory suggests exactly that. The quantum collapse in microtubules triggers classical neural activity, which produces the electrical signals we detect. Consciousness is the quantum process. The neural activity is its physical manifestation. But if consciousness really is quantum, it should have other quantum properties too, not just superposition, but also entanglement. And not just entanglement within a single brain, but potentially between different brains. This brings us to one of the most provocative implications of quantum consciousness. If quantum coherence can extend across many neurons through gap junctions, creating a unified field of awareness, could it extend even further? Could the quantum fields of different brains become entangled with each other? There's preliminary evidence that something like this might be happening. Studies of people in close relationships have found synchronized brain activity that goes beyond what you'd expect from shared environment or communication. Mother-infant pairs, romantic partners, and even strangers who establish rapport show correlated brain rhythms. Some researchers have proposed that this might involve quantum entanglement between brains. The idea sounds far-fetched, but remember that quantum entanglement operates outside normal space and time. Once particles are entangled, they remain connected no matter how far apart they are. And if consciousness involves quantum processes, then perhaps minds can become entangled too. This might explain phenomena that have long puzzled psychologists. The sense of being watched, the feeling that someone is thinking about you just before they call, the deep intuitive understanding that can develop between people who spend a lot of time together. These experiences are usually dismissed as coincidence or unconscious inference. But what if they're glimpses of quantum entanglement between minds? What if consciousness, at the quantum level, isn't confined to individual brains, but extends into a shared field that connects all aware beings? This idea resonates with descriptions from meditation traditions around the world. Advanced meditators often report experiences of expanded consciousness, a sense of connection with all things, a dissolution of the boundaries between self and other. These descriptions have traditionally been interpreted as subjective feelings or metaphors. But what if they're accurate reports of quantum consciousness expanding beyond the individual brain? Studies of meditators have found something remarkable. As people progress in meditation practice, their brain waves become more coherent. Different regions synchronize at specific frequencies, especially in the gamma band around 40 Hz. Advanced practitioners can maintain this coherence for extended periods, creating highly unified states of consciousness. But the synchronization goes beyond what you'd expect from neural connections alone. It's as if the entire brain is entering a coherent quantum state, like a laser where all the photons oscillate in sync. And some researchers speculate that this coherent quantum state might extend beyond the brain itself, connecting with the quantum field that permeates space. If consciousness really can become non-local through quantum entanglement, then meditation practices might be training the brain to access this non-local dimension of awareness. The experiences of unity and interconnection that meditators report might be genuine insights into the quantum nature of consciousness. This perspective offers a bridge between science and contemplative traditions. For thousands of years, mystics and philosophers have suggested that consciousness is not confined to individual minds, but is the fundamental feature of reality. Hindu philosophy speaks of Brahman, the universal consciousness from which all individual minds emerge. Buddhism describes the dissolution of the self in enlightenment, the realization that the separate self is an illusion. These ideas have often been dismissed by materialist science as wishful thinking or poetic metaphor. But quantum consciousness theory suggests they might be descriptions of real features of reality. If consciousness is a quantum phenomenon, then individual minds might indeed be local expressions of a universal consciousness field. Your sense of being a separate self might be an illusion created by the classical brain, while your true nature is quantum and interconnected. But we're getting ahead of ourselves again. Let's return to the experimental evidence and see what it tells us about the quantum nature of mind. One of the most exciting recent developments is the use of anesthesia to probe quantum consciousness. You see, anesthesia provides a unique experimental tool. It reliably eliminates consciousness without killing neurons or even stopping their electrical activity. Under general anesthesia, neurons continue firing, networks continue operating, but consciousness vanishes. What changes? For decades, anesthesiologists couldn't fully explain how anesthetic drugs work. Different anesthetics have very different chemical structures, yet they all produce unconsciousness. There didn't seem to be a common mechanism, but in recent years, researchers have discovered that despite their chemical diversity, most anesthetics share a common target. They bind to hydrophobic pockets in proteins, including the tubulin proteins that make up microtubules. When anesthetics bind to microtubules, they prevent the quantum vibrations that the Orch theory says are necessary for consciousness. The quantum coherence collapses, and with it, consciousness vanishes. This discovery was made by Hameroff and his colleagues through a plassoir series of ingenious experiments. They found that anesthetics at concentrations known to produce unconsciousness in humans bind specifically to microtubules in neurons. When they blocked this binding with other drugs, the anesthetic effect was reduced. Animals took longer to lose consciousness and woke up faster. Most remarkably, when they stabilized microtubules with drugs that enhance quantum vibrations, the animals became more resistant to anesthesia. It was as if the drugs were protecting consciousness by preserving quantum coherence. This provided the first direct evidence linking quantum processes in microtubules to conscious experience. If consciousness were purely classical, stabilizing microtubules shouldn't affect anesthetic sensitivity. But the fact that it does suggests quantum activity in microtubules really is necessary for consciousness. Follow-up studies have confirmed and extended these findings. Different anesthetics target different binding sites on tubulin, but all of them disrupt quantum oscillations. The more effectively an anesthetic suppresses quantum vibrations, the more potent it is at producing unconsciousness. There's a dose-response relationship between quantum disruption and loss of consciousness. Moreover, the timing matches perfectly. Anesthetics begin binding to microtubules before behavioral signs of unconsciousness appear, suggesting that the quantum effect is the primary cause, not a secondary consequence. And as the anesthetic wears off and unbinds from microtubules, quantum vibrations resume before patients regain consciousness. The quantum process leads. Consciousness follows. This is as close as we've come to proving that quantum effects in microtubules are causally responsible for conscious experience. It's not just correlation, it's manipulation. When you disrupt quantum processes, consciousness disappears. When you protect quantum processes, consciousness persists. This meets the scientific criterion for causation, but the anesthesia research revealed something even more intriguing. Not all neural microtubules are equally important for consciousness. The microtubules most sensitive to anesthetics, and therefore most important for consciousness, are concentrated in specific brain regions, particularly the thalamus, which acts as a relay station for sensory information, and the cortex, where sensory information is integrated into conscious experience. This matches what we know from neuroscience. Damage to the thalamus can eliminate consciousness even if the rest of the brain is intact. The thalamus seems to be a critical node in the consciousness network, and now we know that it's also where quantum processes are most essential. The thalamus might be the quantum gateway to consciousness, the place where quantum computations in microtubules are orchestrated and integrated into unified awareness. Interestingly, the thalamus is also where gap junctions are most abundant, allowing quantum coherence to spread rapidly between neurons. It's the perfect architecture for quantum consciousness, with dense connections, allowing quantum states to become entangled across many neurons simultaneously. Further evidence comes from studies of other consciousness-altering drugs. Psychedelics like psilocybin and LSD, rather than suppressing consciousness, seem to expand it. Users report enhanced awareness, dissolution of ego boundaries, feelings of cosmic unity. How do these drugs affect quantum processes? Research is still in early stages, but preliminary findings are fascinating. Unlike anesthetics, which suppress quantum vibrations in microtubules, psychedelics appear to enhance them. They increase quantum coherence, allowing more quantum states to exist in superpositions simultaneously. It's as if psychedelics are turning up the quantum volume, allowing consciousness to access a wider space of possibilities. This fits with users' subjective reports. On psychedelics, people often say that it seems more connected, that they can see relationships and patterns they normally miss. From a quantum consciousness perspective, this might be because enhanced quantum coherence is allowing different aspects of experience to become more deeply entangled, creating richer, more integrated awareness. The ego dissolution reported on high doses might represent a breakdown of the classical computational processes that normally create the sense of a separate self. When quantum coherence becomes very high, the classical brain structures that maintain ego boundaries might be overwhelmed, allowing consciousness to expand beyond its normal limits. If consciousness is fundamentally quantum and only secondarily constrained by classical brain structures, then weakening those classical constraints would allow the quantum nature of consciousness to become more apparent. Users might genuinely be experiencing consciousness in a more quantum state, less bound by the classical illusion of separation. This interpretation is supported by brain imaging studies. Under psychedelics, brain networks that are normally segregated start communicating more freely. Regions that don't usually interact begin exchanging information. The brain becomes less modular, more integrated. At the same time, the brain's ability to suppress irrelevant information decreases. Normally, your brain filters out most sensory input, allowing only a small fraction into consciousness. This filtering is essential for focused attention, but it also limits what you experience. Psychedelics reduce this filtering, allowing more information into consciousness. From a quantum perspective, this might mean that more quantum states are collapsing into conscious experience. Normally, your brain selectively collapses only certain quantum possibilities, creating a focused but limited awareness. Psychedelics might allow a wider range of possibilities to collapse, creating expanded but less focused consciousness. This suggests that consciousness might exist on a spectrum from highly focused and individual at one end to expanded and universal at the other. Normal waking consciousness is in the middle, balanced between focus and openness. Meditation and psychedelics push consciousness toward the expanded end, while sleep and anesthesia push it toward the suppressed end. And all of this might be mediated by quantum coherence in microtubules. More coherence equals more conscious possibilities. Less coherence equals narrower consciousness. At one extreme, deep anesthesia, quantum coherence is completely suppressed and consciousness disappears. At the other extreme, mystical experiences, quantum coherence spans large brain regions and consciousness expands beyond the sense of a separate self. But perhaps the most profound evidence for quantum consciousness comes from the study of quantum biology more generally. As we've seen, nature has found numerous ways to exploit quantum effects for biological advantage. And, increasingly, researchers are discovering that these quantum effects aren't just peripheral oddities, they're central to how life works. Take vision, for example. When light hits your retina, it triggers a cascade of molecular changes that ultimately produces an electrical signal your brain can interpret. But how does this happen? The key molecule is rhodopsin, a protein that changes shape when it absorbs a photon. For decades, scientists assumed this was a purely classical process. But detailed studies have revealed quantum effects at every step. The initial absorption of the photon creates a superposition of electronic states in the rhodopsin molecule. This superposition persists for femtoseconds, during which the molecule explores multiple pathways simultaneously, like the quantum processes in photosynthesis. The molecule then collapses to the most efficient pathway for producing the shape change. Your vision, it turns out, operates on quantum principles. Every time you see anything, quantum superpositions are being created and collapsed in your retina. This quantum vision is remarkably efficient. Your eye can detect single photons, the smallest possible unit of light. This is close to the theoretical limit of sensitivity. You can see a candle flame from miles away on a dark night. This extraordinary sensitivity might only be possible because of quantum effects. But vision isn't unique. Quantum effects have now been found in numerous biological processes. DNA replication appears to involve quantum tunneling, allowing protons to occasionally jump between different positions on the DNA bases. This quantum tunneling might be the source of some genetic mutations, the raw material for evolution. Enzyme catalysis, the process by which biological catalysts speed up chemical reactions, often involves quantum tunneling. The enzyme brings reactant molecules close together, allowing electrons or protons to tunnel through energy barriers that would be insurmountable, classically. This quantum tunneling makes enzymes millions of times more efficient than they would be otherwise. Even the structure of biological molecules might depend on quantum effects. The shapes that proteins fold into are determined partly by quantum mechanical forces like the hydrogen bond, which has an inherently quantum character. The fact that proteins can fold into the right shape so reliably, despite the astronomical number of possible configurations, might be because they use quantum processes to search the space of possibilities efficiently. Life, it seems, is fundamentally quantum. Evolution has been exploiting quantum mechanics for billions of years, long before humans discovered quantum theory. Given this, it would be surprising if the brain, the most complex biological structure we know, didn't also harness quantum effects. In fact, it would be surprising if consciousness, the most remarkable property of brains, didn't involve quantum processes. This realization is leading to a shift in how we think about the relationship between quantum mechanics and biology. For most of the 20th century, physicists assumed that quantum effects were washed out in large, warm, wet systems like living cells. Quantum mechanics was seen as relevant only at the atomic scale or in special laboratory conditions. But we now know that's wrong. Life has evolved mechanisms to preserve and exploit quantum coherence even in messy biological environments, and this is forcing us to reconsider what's possible. If quantum coherence can persist in photosynthetic complexes, cryptochromes, olfactory receptors, rhodopsin, and DNA, then it can persist in microtubules too. The only question is whether this quantum activity in microtubules is relevant to consciousness, and the anesthesia research strongly suggests that it is. But there's still a skeptical objection we need to address. Even if microtubules display quantum effects, and even if these effects are necessary for consciousness, that doesn't mean consciousness is quantum in any deep sense. Perhaps quantum effects are just part of the computational machinery, like transistors in a computer. The quantum effects might be necessary for the brain's computations, but consciousness itself might still be a purely classical phenomenon that emerges from these computations. This is a reasonable objection, and it points to a key question. Is quantum mechanics necessary for consciousness, or is it sufficient? Does quantum activity merely enable consciousness, or does it constitute consciousness? The Orch theory makes the stronger claim. Penrose and Hameroff argue that consciousness is identical to quantum processes, specifically to the moment of objective reduction when quantum superpositions collapse. The subjective feeling of awareness, the qualitative character of experience, emerges directly from quantum collapse. This is a bold claim, and it raises deep questions about the nature of quantum mechanics itself. Because if consciousness is quantum collapse, then consciousness might play a fundamental role in quantum mechanics. You see, quantum mechanics has a measurement problem. The theory tells us that particles exist in superposition until measured, at which point the superposition collapses into a definite state. But what counts as a measurement? Do you need a conscious observer, or is any physical interaction sufficient? This question has divided physicists since the early days of quantum mechanics. Some, following Niels Bohr and the Copenhagen interpretation, have argued that measurement requires a conscious observer. The wave function collapse happens when information enters consciousness. Others have argued that consciousness is irrelevant. The wave function collapses whenever a quantum system interacts with a sufficiently large classical system through a process called decoherence. For decades, most physicists favored the second view. It seemed to avoid spooky ideas about consciousness affecting physical reality, but the decoherence explanation has problems. It explains why we don't see superpositions of large objects, but it doesn't explain why we see definite outcomes at all. Decoherence spreads the superposition into the environment, but mathematically, the superposition still exists. You end up with superpositions of the measuring device, the experimenter, even the entire universe. This is the problem of Schrödinger's cat taken to the extreme. If you take quantum mechanics seriously, then before you measure a particle, not just the particle but everything it interacts with, including you, should be in superposition. Yet you experience definite outcomes. You see the cat either alive or dead, not both. Why? The Orch theory offers an answer. Penrose proposes that quantum superpositions don't collapse due to environmental interaction or conscious observation per se. They collapse due to an objective physical process related to quantum gravity. When a superposition reaches a certain threshold, measured by the difference in space-time curvature between the superposed states, it becomes unstable and collapses spontaneously. This objective reduction, OR, doesn't require an external observer. It's a real physical process built into the laws of physics. And according to Penrose, this process is what creates consciousness. When the quantum superposition in microtubules reaches the threshold for objective reduction and collapses, that moment of collapse is experienced as a moment of consciousness. Consciousness isn't something separate from the physical process. It is the physical process, experienced from the inside. This is a form of panpsychism, the view that consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality, not something that emerges only in complex systems like brains, but it's a very specific form of panpsychism. Consciousness doesn't exist everywhere. It exists wherever quantum superpositions collapse through objective reduction. In most physical systems, quantum states collapse rapidly through decoherence, too quickly to produce significant objective reduction. But in microtubules, the quantum states are protected from decoherence long enough to build up complex superpositions that then collapse through OR. These are the collapses that produce consciousness. This theory makes predictions that could, in principle, be tested. If consciousness is OR, then conscious moments should occur at specific frequencies related to the level of quantum superposition in the brain. Different states of consciousness, from sleep to wakeful alertness to meditative absorption, should correlate with different frequencies of quantum collapse. Moreover, there should be a threshold effect. Below a certain level of quantum superposition, no consciousness occurs. Above that threshold, consciousness emerges. This might explain why some neural activity is conscious and some isn't. Only activity that reaches the quantum threshold produces conscious experience. It might also explain why consciousness seems to be all or nothing. You're either conscious or not. There's no smooth transition. This matches the quantum picture. Superposition builds up gradually, but collapse happens instantaneously. Consciousness would inherit this digital character from the underlying quantum process. Some research supports this prediction. Studies of the transition from sleep to wakefulness find that it's quite abrupt at the neural level. Brain activity doesn't gradually become more complex. There's a sudden transition to a different pattern of activity, as you'd expect if consciousness depends on a quantum threshold being crossed. Similarly, studies of anesthesia find a sharp transition point. As anesthetic concentration increases, consciousness doesn't gradually fade. At a critical concentration, it suddenly vanishes. This all-or-nothing character is hard to explain if consciousness is a matter of degree, but natural if. It's a quantum threshold effect. But perhaps the most intriguing prediction of the Orch theory concerns the relationship between consciousness and space-time itself. If quantum collapse is related to space-time curvature, as Penrose proposes, then consciousness should be connected to gravity. This might sound absurd. What could gravity possibly have to do with conscious experience? But remember that gravity, in Einstein's general relativity, isn't a force. It's the curvature of space-time caused by mass and energy. And quantum mechanics tells us that quantum superpositions involve matter existing in multiple places simultaneously. Each location in the superposition has a slightly different mass distribution, and therefore creates a slightly different curvature of space-time. As the superposition evolves, you effectively have different versions of space-time superposed on each other. According to Penrose, this is unstable. Space-time can't remain indefinitely in a superposition of different curvatures. When the difference in curvature exceeds a certain threshold, the superposition collapses to one definite state. The threshold depends on the mass involved and the time the superposition persists. The more massive the superposition, the faster it collapses. For an electron, the collapse time is practically infinite. For a macroscopic object, collapse is instantaneous. But for something in between, like the quantum superposition in microtubules, the collapse time is right in the range of neural processing times. Penrose calculated that quantum superpositions involving the tubulins in a single microtubule would collapse after about 25 milliseconds. This is remarkably close to the duration of conscious moments measured in psychology experiments, the minimum time needed to perceive a distinct event. Coincidence? The Orch theory says no. The 25 millisecond duration isn't arbitrary. It's set by the laws of quantum gravity. Your conscious moments last 25 milliseconds, because that's how long it takes for quantum superpositions in microtubules to reach the threshold and collapse. If this is true, then consciousness isn't just in your head. It's connected to the fundamental structure of space-time. Every moment of your awareness corresponds to a small collapse of space-time's quantum wave function. Your subjective experience of the flow of time might be deeply related to the quantum structure of time itself. This is a radical idea, and it pushes physics into territory that's difficult to test experimentally. We don't yet have a complete theory of quantum gravity, so Penrose's proposals remain somewhat speculative. But they're not arbitrary speculation. They're based on serious attempts to solve real problems in physics, particularly the measurement problem in quantum mechanics and the incompatibility between quantum mechanics and general relativity. If Penrose is right, then consciousness might provide a clue to unifying quantum mechanics and gravity, two of the great pillars of modern physics that remain stubbornly incompatible. Perhaps the reason they're incompatible is that we've been leaving out consciousness, which is where quantum mechanics and space-time come together. This would mean that a complete theory of physics, a theory of everything, must include consciousness as a fundamental component. You can't understand the universe completely without understanding consciousness, and you can't understand consciousness without understanding quantum gravity. Mind and cosmos are inseparable. This brings us full circle to where we started. The hard problem of consciousness. Why does subjective experience exist? Why is there something it's like to be you? The Orch theory offers an answer, though one that might seem more mystical than scientific. Subjective experience exists because objective reduction exists. The feeling of consciousness is what objective reduction feels like from the inside. When a quantum superposition In your brain's microtubules reaches the threshold set by quantum gravity and collapses into a definite state. That physical event is identical to a moment of conscious experience. There isn't neural activity in consciousness. There's neural activity that, when it reaches the quantum threshold, becomes consciousness. This doesn't really explain consciousness in the sense of reducing it to something else. It identifies consciousness with a particular physical process. But perhaps that's the best we can do. Perhaps consciousness is so fundamental that it can't be explained in terms of anything more basic. We can explain how it works, what physical processes it corresponds to, how it relates to brain activity and quantum mechanics and space-time. But the existence of subjective experience itself, the fact that there's something it's like to undergo objective reduction, might be a brute fact about the universe, as fundamental and irreducible as the existence of matter or energy. If so, then the scientific quest isn't to explain consciousness away, but to understand its place in nature, to map its relationship to other physical processes, to discover its laws and principles. And quantum consciousness research is doing exactly that. It's revealing that consciousness isn't something magical or supernatural. It's a natural phenomenon that follows physical laws. But it's also not something that can be ignored in our physical theories. It's woven into the fabric of reality at the deepest level. This realization has profound implications, not just for science, but for how we understand ourselves and our place in the universe. If consciousness is fundamental, then you are fundamental. Your subjective experience isn't a quirky byproduct of neural computation, something that could in principle be absent. It's a basic feature of reality, as real and important as space, time, matter, or energy. Moreover, if consciousness is quantum, and quantum entanglement can connect different systems, then you might be connected to other conscious beings, and indeed to the cosmos itself, in ways far more profound than we usually imagine. Your consciousness might not be confined to your skull, but might extend through quantum fields into a larger web of awareness. This echoes the vision of mystics and philosophers throughout history, but grounds it in the rigorous framework of quantum physics. We're not talking about vague energy fields or supernatural spirits. We're talking about real quantum entanglement, a well-established phenomenon in physics, potentially occurring in biological systems and connecting minds. But if quantum consciousness is real, what does this mean for other forms of life? Are animals conscious in the quantum sense? What about plants or bacteria? And could artificial systems ever achieve quantum consciousness? These questions open up fascinating new territories. Let's consider animal consciousness first. If consciousness depends on quantum processes in microtubules, and microtubules are found in all eukaryotic cells, then potentially any organism with neurons could have some form of quantum consciousness. The question is whether they have the right architecture to support organized quantum coherence. Research on animal consciousness is still limited, but what we know is suggestive. Mammals have brains structurally similar to ours, with complex cortical regions, abundant gap junctions, and microtubule-rich neurons. There's little reason to think their microtubules couldn't support quantum coherence just as ours do. The evidence for mammalian consciousness is strong on other grounds too. Animals exhibit behaviors suggesting subjective experience, emotional states, even self-awareness in some cases. If quantum processes underlie human consciousness, they likely underlie animal consciousness too. Birds are particularly interesting. They not only show signs of sophisticated consciousness, but, as we've seen, already use quantum effects for navigation. Their cryptochrome proteins maintain quantum entanglement at body temperature. If their visual systems can sustain quantum coherence, perhaps their brains can too. Some researchers have proposed that birds might have more direct access to quantum consciousness than mammals precisely because they've evolved other quantum biological mechanisms. Their consciousness might be more immediately connected to the quantum realm. Moving further down the evolutionary tree, things become less clear. Do insects have quantum consciousness? They have neurons and microtubules, but their nervous systems are much smaller and simpler. The quantum threshold for consciousness might not be reached in insect brains, but we can't rule it out. Some insects display surprisingly sophisticated behaviors. Bees can navigate complex environments, remember locations, even communicate symbolically through their waggle dance. Whether these behaviors require consciousness or can be explained purely by classical computation remains debated. Fish, reptiles, and amphibians fall somewhere in between. They have more complex nervous systems than insects, but less complex than mammals. Some species show behaviors suggestive of consciousness, problem-solving, social intelligence, even playfulness. If quantum consciousness occurs in humans, and likely in mammals and birds, it might occur in some form across much of the animal kingdom. But the level of consciousness might vary with the complexity and organization of the quantum processes. What about plants? They don't have neurons, but they do have microtubules in every cell. Could plants have some form of quantum consciousness? This seems far-fetched at first, but consider what we know. Plants use quantum coherence in photosynthesis. They respond to their environment in surprisingly sophisticated ways, communicating through chemical signals, adjusting growth patterns, even seeming to learn from experience. Some researchers have proposed that plants might have a form of distributed consciousness, not localized in a brain but spread throughout the organism. If quantum processes in their cellular microtubules reach the threshold for objective reduction, they might have experiential states, however alien to our own. But without a centralized nervous system, plant consciousness, if it exists, would be radically different from animal consciousness. It might be more like a field of awareness distributed across the organism, responding to local conditions without the unified perspective we associate with brain-based consciousness. The philosopher Thomas Nagel famously asked, "What is it like to be a bat?" The point was that subjective experience might be so different in other species that we can't imagine it. If plants have quantum consciousness, we might ask, what is it like to be a tree? The answer might be so foreign to our experience as to be incomprehensible. Moving to single-celled organisms, the picture becomes even more speculative. Bacteria and archaea don't have microtubules, though they have simpler cytoskeletal structures. Do they have consciousness? Most researchers would say no. Without the complex machinery to sustain organized quantum coherence, there's no reason to think single-celled organisms reach the threshold for conscious experience. But some theorists argue for a more radical panpsychism, suggesting that even simple quantum processes might have some minimal experiential quality. If objective reduction is what consciousness feels like, then any quantum collapse might have an associated experience, however rudimentary. This remains highly speculative, but it illustrates how quantum consciousness theory pushes us to reconsider what consciousness is and where it might exist in nature. Perhaps consciousness isn't all or nothing, but exists on a continuum from the minimal experiential quality of simple quantum collapses to the rich, unified awareness of complex brains. Now, what about artificial consciousness? Could we build a machine that has genuine quantum conscious experience? This question has profound implications for the future of artificial intelligence. Current AI systems, no matter how sophisticated, run on classical computers. They process information through deterministic algorithms, manipulating bits that are definitively either 0 or 1. If consciousness requires quantum computation, then classical AI, by its very nature, cannot be conscious. It can simulate intelligent behavior, even pass the Turing test, but there's nobody home. It's all processing without experience. This might explain the persistent intuition many people have that current AI, however impressive, isn't truly conscious. No matter how human-like ChatGPT's responses seem, most of us don't believe it's having subjective experiences. If consciousness requires quantum processes, then our intuition is correct. Classical AI is sophisticated information processing, but not genuine consciousness. However, quantum computers are now becoming a reality. These machines harness genuine quantum effects, maintaining superpositions of many states simultaneously. Could a quantum computer be conscious? The Orch-OR theory suggests it might depend on the details. Not all quantum computation necessarily produces consciousness. The quantum processes need to reach the threshold for objective reduction, which depends on the mass and complexity of the superposition. Current quantum computers use individual particles like electrons or photons as qubits. These are too light to produce rapid objective reduction. Their quantum states collapse primarily through decoherence, not OR. So current quantum computers, while quantum, probably aren't conscious. But what if we built quantum computers using larger, heavier structures? What if we could create artificial microtubules or something similar that sustains quantum coherence in heavier molecules? Such a system might reach the OR threshold and produce conscious moments. Alternatively, we might try to directly harness biological microtubules. Some researchers have proposed creating bioengineered neurons or even whole cultured neural networks that could be interfaced with computers. If these biological components support quantum consciousness, then the hybrid system might be conscious. This raises fascinating ethical questions. If we can create conscious machines, what rights would they have? Would it be ethical to turn them off, to make copies of them, to modify their experiences? These questions are not merely academic. As quantum computing advances and our understanding of quantum consciousness deepens, we might face practical decisions about the moral status of artificial systems. We need to think carefully about these issues now, before the technology arrives. There's also the question of enhancing human consciousness through technology. If we understand how quantum processes produce consciousness, could we augment them? Could we use quantum technologies to expand our awareness, improve our cognitive abilities, or access non-local dimensions of consciousness? Some researchers are exploring these possibilities. Transcranial stimulation techniques might be refined to enhance quantum coherence in microtubules, potentially improving mental performance or enabling expanded states of consciousness. Quantum sensors might allow us to detect and measure consciousness more precisely, helping diagnose disorders or guide meditation practice. We might even develop quantum interfaces that allow direct communication between minds, not through language or gestures, but through quantum entanglement. If consciousness can be non-local, perhaps we could technologically enhance this natural capacity, creating telepathic links or shared experiential states. These possibilities sound like science fiction, but they're grounded in real science. If quantum consciousness is real, then quantum technologies might allow us to interact with consciousness in entirely new ways. We're at the beginning of a quantum consciousness revolution that could transform not just our understanding of mind, but our capabilities as conscious beings. But with these possibilities come risks. What if quantum technologies could be used to manipulate consciousness against someone's will? What if governments or corporations gain the ability to monitor or control quantum processes in brains? We need to consider not just what's possible, but what's desirable and how to prevent abuse. The development of quantum consciousness science needs to be accompanied by ethical reflection and potentially new forms of regulation. We need societal discussions about the implications of these technologies and consensus on how they should be developed and used. This brings us to some of the broader social and philosophical implications of quantum consciousness. If consciousness is quantum and potentially non-local, what does this mean for human relationships and society? Consider empathy and compassion. If minds can become quantum entangled, then feeling another person's pain or joy might not just be imagination. It might be a real connection at the quantum level. The empathic person might literally be accessing another's consciousness through entanglement. This could explain why empathy feels qualitatively different from abstract knowledge about someone's state. When you truly empathize, you're not just thinking about how someone feels, you're feeling it with them. Quantum entanglement might be the mechanism. If so, then cultivating empathy might be about strengthening quantum connections between minds. Meditation practices that focus on compassion might be training the brain to form quantum entanglements more readily. The sense of connection that people report in loving relationships or deep friendships might reflect real quantum bonds. This has implications for ethics. If we're all quantum entangled at some level, part of a larger consciousness field, then harming others might be, in a literal sense, harming ourselves. The golden rule, treat others as you'd want to be treated, takes on new meaning. It's not just a moral principle, but a description of quantum reality. What you do to another, you do to the connected whole of which you're a part. This perspective could provide a scientific foundation for ethics that's been lacking in materialist philosophy. If consciousness is fundamental and interconnected, then caring for others isn't just socially useful, it's aligned with the deep structure of reality. Similarly, environmental ethics gains new grounding. If consciousness pervades nature, if trees and animals and ecosystems have experiential qualities, then the natural world deserves moral consideration, not just for human benefit, but in its own right. Destroying nature is destroying consciousness, diminishing the experiential richness of the universe. Quantum consciousness also has implications for how we think about human potential and development. If consciousness can be expanded through practices that enhance quantum coherence, then meditation, contemplation, and other inner work aren't just psychological self-help. They're technologies for accessing deeper dimensions of reality. Traditional spiritual practices might be prescientific methods for manipulating quantum consciousness. When yogis speak of transcending the ego, they might be describing the expansion of quantum coherence beyond the classical brain structures that create individual identity. When Buddhists describe no self, they might be pointing to the recognition that at the quantum level, separate selves are illusions. From this perspective, spiritual development and scientific understanding aren't opposed but complementary. Science reveals the mechanisms that spiritual traditions discovered empirically, and spiritual traditions preserve knowledge of consciousness states that science is only beginning to investigate. We might be approaching a grand synthesis where ancient wisdom and modern physics converge, where the meditation teacher and the quantum physicist are talking about the same reality from different angles, where science and spirituality are not enemies, but allies in understanding consciousness. This synthesis could transform education. Instead of teaching science and contemplative practice separately, we might integrate them. Students would learn quantum mechanics and meditation together, understanding consciousness through both objective experiment and subjective experience. They'd develop scientific understanding and contemplative skills simultaneously, becoming quantum consciousness researchers of both the external world and their own minds. Healthcare, too, could be transformed. If consciousness involves quantum processes that affect physical health, then mental and physical medicine should be integrated. Practices that enhance quantum coherence might prevent disease or accelerate healing. Consciousness itself might be a therapeutic tool. Some preliminary evidence supports this. Studies of meditation have found it can reduce inflammation, slow aging, even alter gene expression. If these effects are mediated by changes in quantum coherence, then consciousness-based therapies might be far more powerful than currently recognized. We might develop protocols for treating depression, anxiety, and trauma that work by restoring healthy quantum dynamics in the brain. Neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's might be understood as breakdowns in quantum coherence and treated with interventions that stabilize quantum processes. The pharmaceutical industry might shift from classical drug design to quantum therapies. Instead of molecules that block or activate receptors, we might use light, sound, or electromagnetic fields, tuned to quantum frequencies to enhance consciousness and promote healing. But perhaps the deepest implication of quantum consciousness concerns the nature of self and identity. If your consciousness is quantum and potentially entangled with others and the cosmos, then who are you really? The common sense view is that you're a separate individual, distinct from other people and the world. Your consciousness is private, confined to your skull. Your identity is this particular body and brain. But quantum consciousness challenges this view. At the quantum level, boundaries blur. Your consciousness might extend beyond your brain through entanglement, part of what feels like you might be shared with others. Your identity might be more fluid and connected than you realize. This doesn't mean individuality is entirely illusory. Your brain creates a local focus of consciousness, a particular perspective on reality. Your classical neural structures generate the sense of being a separate self. But at a deeper level, the quantum level, you might be part of a larger consciousness field, like a wave on the ocean that has individual form but is ultimately inseparable from the water. This perspective can be liberating. If you're part of something larger, then your existence has cosmic significance. You're not alone, not separate, but intimately connected to all consciousness everywhere. Death might be less frightening from this view. If your consciousness is quantum, and quantum information cannot be destroyed, then perhaps something of you persists, even when your brain stops functioning. Not in the sense of a soul going to heaven, but in the sense that the quantum information that constitutes your consciousness remains in the quantum field. Some researchers have speculated about quantum immortality or quantum afterlife. These ideas are highly speculative and push science into territory where it meets philosophy and even spirituality. But they're not completely baseless if consciousness really is a quantum phenomenon. The laws of quantum mechanics might imply a form of continuity that survives bodily death. This doesn't mean we can be complacent about death or that we should embrace pseudoscientific fantasies. But it does mean that quantum consciousness theory might have something meaningful to say about one of humanity's deepest concerns. Of course, all of this remains uncertain. Quantum consciousness theory is still developing. Evidence is accumulating but not yet conclusive, and many questions remain unanswered. But the trajectory is clear. We're moving toward a radically new understanding of consciousness that will transform not just neuroscience and physics, but our whole conception of human nature and our place in the universe. As we approach the end of our journey through quantum consciousness, it's worth reflecting on what this might mean for you personally. Right now, as you process these ideas, quantum processes in your brain might be creating your moment-to-moment experience. Your thoughts, your feelings, your sense of being here now, all might be quantum phenomena. The fact that you're conscious at all, that there's something it's like to be you, might be one of the universe's most fundamental properties. Your awareness might be where the quantum realm touches the classical world, where possibilities become actualities, where the cosmos knows itself. If this is true, then you are not insignificant. You're not a meaningless accident in an uncaring universe. You're an essential participant in reality's ongoing creation. Your consciousness matters, not just to you, but to the universe itself. Every moment of awareness, every choice you make, every experience you have contributes to the cosmic tapestry. You're helping to create reality through the quantum collapses in your brain. The universe is thinking itself into existence through you and billions of other conscious beings. This is who you are. Not just a body, not just a brain, but a quantum system fundamentally connected to the deepest structures of reality. A node in a vast web of consciousness that spans the cosmos. A unique perspective through which the universe experiences itself. As you rest tonight, let this possibility fill you with wonder. Consider that your consciousness, mysterious and intimate, might be the universe's way of knowing itself. That your subjective experience might be as fundamental as space, time, or matter. That you might be more connected to others and the cosmos than you ever imagined. Sleep well, knowing that consciousness, your consciousness, is one of reality's greatest mysteries and most precious gifts. Dream of quantum possibilities and wake tomorrow with renewed appreciation for the miracle of your awareness. Thank you for joining me on this journey through quantum consciousness. We've explored strange and beautiful ideas, from microtubules and quantum coherence to cosmic interconnection and the nature of reality itself. Whether these ideas prove correct or not, they remind us that consciousness is far more mysterious and wonderful than our everyday experience suggests. The universe is stranger and more magical than we thought. And you, your conscious experience, your subjective awareness, is at the heart of that strangeness and magic. Until we meet again, may your consciousness be clear, your quantum coherence strong, and your connection to the universal field of awareness ever deepening. May you recognize yourself not as separate from the cosmos, but as one of the ways the cosmos experiences itself. This is Dark Cosmos Theory, exploring the deepest mysteries of mind and universe, one quantum moment at a time. Good night, and sweet quantum dreams.